What happens when one man's voice echoes louder in death than it ever did in life? The day the news broke, Nashville didn't just mourn, it trembled. Social feeds flooded within minutes. Some posted prayers, others posted warnings. But beneath the surface, something deeper was happening, something that revealed cracks in country music's soul that had been forming for years. This wasn't just about losing a man, it was about what his life and his sudden absence uncovered. Because love him or hate him, Charlie Kirk had become more than a name. To millions, he was a voice, sometimes comforting, sometimes infuriating, but always unafraid. He didn't sing a single note, but somehow he became part of the soundtrack, the kind of presence you couldn't ignore. And when that voice went silent, the echoes reached every corner of Nashville, from sold-out arenas to backroom meetings where publicists whispered about what to say and what to avoid. Some called it a tragedy, others saw it as a reckoning, but no one could deny what it exposed: a deep divide inside a genre built on unity, family, and faith. Country music had always promised to tell America's story. The struggles, the triumphs, the truths no one else would say out loud. But now the genre faced a story of its own, one that tested every promise it had ever made. So what really happened after Charlie's death? Why did his passing trigger reactions so fierce they turned friends into rivals, and silence into statements? And what does it reveal about the future of country music itself? To understand that, we have to start where the tremor began, the moment the news hit, and the industry realized this wasn't just another obituary. It was the beginning of a storm. When the first headlines appeared, "Charlie Kirk dead at 41, the reaction was instant and electric. Within hours, the entire country music world seemed to divide down invisible lines. Hashtags trended. Fans argued. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. And in the heart of Nashville, artists who once sang side by side now found themselves on opposite sides of something much larger than grief. Because this wasn't just about a man, it was about what he represented. For years, Charlie had positioned himself as a champion of traditional values: God, family, and country. He celebrated songs about small towns, Sunday mornings, and second chances. And for a huge part of the audience, he was a mirror of what they loved most about the genre: authenticity, simplicity, pride. But not everyone agreed with the message or the messenger. To others, Charlie's voice blurred the line between patriotism and politics, pulling country music into fights it never asked for. And as his influence grew, so did the unease among artists who wanted their music to unite, not divide. That's why the reaction to his death wasn't a chorus, it was a clash. Some posted tributes, others stayed silent, and a few spoke in riddles, trying to mourn without aligning. Yet every response, even the quiet ones, became a declaration. Because in today's world, neutrality is a myth. Nashville wasn't just grieving. It was reckoning with a question that had been whispered for years. What does it really mean to be country anymore? And as the noise grew louder, one voice rose first, not out of obligation, but out of loyalty. Jason Aldean had been here before. Controversy wasn't new to him. It was practically stitched into the seams of his jeans. But this time felt different. When he posted a black and white photo of Charlie with the words, "He spoke for millions. Rest easy, brother. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a flare shot into a dark sky." The reaction was immediate. Fans rallied, flooding his post with flags, fire emojis, and verses. But just as quickly came the critics, accusing him of politicizing grief, of fanning old flames. Yet Aldean didn't back down. Because for him, this wasn't about politics. It was personal. Years earlier, when Aldean's song "Try That in a Small Town" ignited national debate, Charlie had been one of his fiercest defenders. While media pundits called him divisive, Kirk called him brave, a real outlaw in a genre that once celebrated defiance, and Aldean never forgot it. So when the world turned on Charlie, Jason stood tall. Not because it was safe, but because it was loyal. In interviews that followed, Aldean spoke with a rare calm. He believed in standing tall when the crowd told you to kneel. I respected that. It was a message that hit deeper than any melody, a warning that silence could no longer protect anyone. Behind the scenes, industry insiders panicked. Sponsors hesitated. PR teams scrambled. But Jason didn't waver. He booked more shows, not fewer. And on stage, his voice carried the same message. This music belongs to the people who live it. The firestorm that followed made one thing clear. In Nashville, grief had become a litmus test, and Aldean had drawn his line in the sand. But not every artist answered the storm with fire. Some turned to something quieter, something older than Outrage. For nearly a week, Dolly said nothing. No posts, no interviews, no mentions. And in that silence, the world waited. Because if anyone could calm a storm, it was her. Then came a single post. In times of division, I pray for peace. May all hearts find comfort. No hashtags. No names. Just hope. But even that gentle message stirred its own tempest. Some praised her wisdom, her refusal to be pulled into a war she never asked for. Others accused her of cowardice, of turning her back on a man many of her fans admired. Yet those who truly knew Dolly understood. For decades, she had walked a line few could balance, refusing to choose sides, believing that music's job was to heal, not divide. She had sung hymns in churches and anthems on world stages, always reminding people that kindness spoke louder than judgment. Still, this moment tested even her, because now, silence wasn't seen as neutral. It was a statement. And every statement, even one wrapped in prayer, became fuel for the fire. Behind closed doors, whispers spread that Dolly had privately reached out to Charlie's family. Not for headlines, but for heart. Asking how his mother was holding up. Sending flowers, not press releases. It was the kind of grace that rarely trends, but never goes unnoticed. And while the world debated her words, another voice, unexpected, raw, and deeply personal, decided to speak next. Morgan Wallen knew controversy. He'd lived through cancellations, comebacks, and criticism, but when the news of Charlie's death reached him, he didn't post a polished statement or hire a PR writer. He opened his phone, hit record, and spoke from the heart. Eyes tired, voice low, he said, "I didn't know Charlie like some did, but I watched him more than people might guess. He made me think, and we don't have a lot of that anymore." Then, after a pause, came something even more vulnerable. "When I was at my worst, getting dropped, getting dragged, I saw Charlie say, 'If we destroy every man who stumbles, we'll have no men left standing.' I never forgot that." The clip was short, unfiltered, human, and in a world obsessed with optics, it hit like truth. Millions watched. Hours later, it was gone. Deleted. No caption, no comment, just silence. Fans speculated, was it pressure, regret, or just a private moment shared too publicly? But it didn't matter. The message had landed. Grief is complicated, and loyalty doesn't always fit cleanly into headlines. For many, Morgan's raw honesty cut deeper than any tribute. It reminded Nashville of something it had almost forgotten, that music, at its core, is about humanity. About the mess, the pain, and the grace that follows. And as his voice faded from the feed, a new question rose in its place. If even silence speaks volumes, what happens when an entire industry can't agree on the song? Morgan's quiet honesty left Nashville stunned. But while the public argued online, something deeper began stirring behind the closed doors of country music's most sacred hall, the Grand Ole Opry. For nearly a century, the Opry had been the heartbeat of country music. Its stage had hosted legends and newcomers, bridging generations under one golden rule: the show must go on. But after Charlie's death, even that timeless stage found itself caught in the storm. Leaked memos hinted at uneasy conversations among executives. Some feared that public tributes might turn into political statements, and quietly urged artists to focus on the music. Others argued that staying silent was its own statement, that the Opry couldn't claim to represent the country's soul while ignoring the man who had become part of its cultural fabric. Whispers spread through green rooms and rehearsal halls. Veteran performers cautioned the younger ones. Choose your words carefully. Everything means something now. But not everyone listened. One emerging artist, barely known outside Nashville, decided to defy the silence. During a late-night set, after the official show had ended, she asked her band to play an unscheduled number, an old patriotic hymn. When the final chord faded, she whispered into the mic, "For Charlie, and for every voice that stood tall." Then she walked off stage. That small moment didn't make headlines, but it made waves. Artists texted one another in private. Was that bravery or career suicide? Some admired her courage, others shook their heads in warning. Inside the Opry, tension rose. Meetings grew heated. The institution that once symbolized unity now faced its own identity crisis. Could a stage built on tradition survive in an era where even grief carried political weight? And as the debate spread through studios, labels, and late-night bars, one truth became impossible to ignore. Country music wasn't just mourning a man, it was questioning itself. Because if even the Opry was torn, what did that say about the rest of Nashville? The answer came soon. Not from the stage, but from the boardrooms and back channels of an industry struggling to find its footing. The fallout didn't stay on social media. It hit the heart of Nashville's business hard. Record labels sent out internal memos, quietly advising artists to avoid sensitive references. Publicists drafted statements for clients who didn't even know what to say. Streaming platforms began reevaluating their playlists, pulling certain tracks, and adjusting algorithms to avoid controversial associations. Sponsors, always watching the winds of public opinion, started backing away from projects that might draw fire. For some, it felt like overreaction. For others, it was damage control. But everyone agreed on one thing. Nothing was the same anymore. Artists who once sang together on the same stage now hesitated to appear in the same photo. Private group chats filled with debates about loyalty, faith, and freedom. Some argued that the industry had lost its backbone. Others believed it was finally facing uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, fans watched the chaos unfold, confused and heartbroken. The genre that had once promised to tell their stories now seemed trapped in one of its own, torn between heritage and headlines. A few brave voices tried to steady the ship. Veteran songwriters reminded peers that country music had survived wars, scandals, and shifting politics before. But even they admitted this felt different. Because now, the divide wasn't just outside, it was inside. And through it all, one haunting question echoed in every corner of Music Row. Can a genre built on truth survive when everyone's afraid to speak it? That question set the stage for the final act of this story. Not a resolution, but a revelation about what country music really stands for when the lights go down. When the storm finally began to quiet, Nashville looked around and realized something had changed forever. The crowds were still singing. The radios were still playing, but the meaning behind the music felt heavier, more fragile, more real. Charlie Kirk hadn't been a singer, but his presence had become a mirror reflecting the tensions within the community. Faith versus fame, tradition versus change, loyalty versus silence. His death forced the genre to confront its contradictions head-on. For some, this was a chance to reclaim what country had always stood for: honesty, resilience, and roots. For others, it was a warning that the genre could no longer hide behind nostalgia. Because the world had shifted. Audiences wanted not just stories of small towns, but courage from those who told them. Jason Aldean's bold stance, Dolly Parton's quiet grace, and Morgan Wallen's raw vulnerability all revealed different sides of the same truth. There was no longer one way to be country. The old rule, stay neutral, stay silent, sing the songs and avoid the fights, were gone. Now every note carried weight. Every silence was a statement. Every tribute, every hesitation told its own story. And yet, beneath the noise and the headlines, something powerful remained. A shared love for the music itself, for the songs that heal, the voices that unite, and the stories that remind us we're not alone. Maybe that's the real lesson Charlie's death left behind. that the heart of country music isn't about politics or perfection. It's about people. Flawed, passionate, searching for truth in three chords and the truth. And as Nashville moves forward, one thing is certain. The genre's greatest test isn't in the spotlight. It's in its soul. In the end, Charlie Kirk's passing became more than a headline. It became a mirror, reflecting every divide, every hope, and every question that country music had been avoiding. His death revealed what words alone couldn't. That this genre, beloved for its honesty, now faces its own reckoning. Can it stay true to its roots while embracing a changing world? Can artists stand firm in their beliefs and still sing songs that unite? Jason Aldean's loyalty, Dolly Parton's compassion, and Morgan Wallen's vulnerability painted a portrait of a community in conflict, but also one searching for meaning. Because behind every argument and every tribute was something universal: grief. And maybe that's where healing begins. Charlie didn't write the songs, but he became part of their story. In life, he stirred conversation. In death, he forced reflection. And perhaps that's his lasting legacy. Not the noise he made, but the silence he left behind. So maybe the real question isn't who was right or wrong. Maybe it's this: what does it truly mean to stand for something when the world is watching? And more importantly, what do you think? Do you believe country music should stay out of politics or speak truth no matter the cost? Drop your thoughts below in the comments, because this story isn't finished. It's being written by every fan, every artist, and every voice that still believes in the power of a song. Because sometimes the conversation that follows is the most important verse of all.